point that I made right at the beginning. If we cut back very significantly on meat and dairy production, then we deprive a lot of people of very high quality protein that is important to their nutrition and livelihood. We must never forget that.
Yep.
Kia ora. So I'm a vegetable grower. I grow organic vegetables just down the road, and I'm also vegetarian. But I want to ask a question about what veganism's relationship with sustainability is. Because the farm is not vegan. I'm vegetarian, but we have livestock on the farm. And in order to produce, we produce very high yields of very high quality vegetables. But in order for us to produce that sustainably, we need a third of the farm to be in livestock. If we don't have a third of the farm in livestock, we need to have a greater land area to produce that food, or we need to fertilizer, and fertilizer is mined. So we're either supporting the dairy industry or the mining industry, and so that's a trade-off. And this is a question for Ronan. How do you justify that trade-off?
I don't necessarily justify it. I think we should be looking at more sustainable ways to actually grow our vegetables as well. I mean, the kind of wave of things like organic growing vegetables and again permaculture and other kind of technologies and I guess even methods, I think is again the answer I have to give you, because yeah, I can see that without some of the kind of byproducts of animals, you've got to replace it with something else. And again, I guess we don't understand the soils enough in New Zealand to actually even spend time to look for alternatives as well. We just take this easy option. So again, for me, I think there is an answer, and it's been proved worldwide there are actually other answers as well.
I think another point that we should make is that we shouldn't assume that growing plants is not increasing greenhouse gas. A recent study in Sweden showed that if you compared a variety of drinks on a common basis, and on their common basis was nutrient density, so you take 100 mils of one drink and it would take 500 mils of another drink, soy produced twice as much greenhouse gas as milk.
But that's usually
Oat milk produced 8 times as much. So we must not make the assumption that plant foods are not contributing at all to greenhouse gas.
But the byproducts are.
Sorry?
But the byproducts of things like animal agriculture actually is producing vast amounts. Because again, it's not just CO2. There are other things like methane, which has been proved to be more harmful as well. So,
well, you shouldn't say that methane's more harmful. Yes, it's more harmful in the short term, but it has a much, much shorter life in the atmosphere compared to CO2. And that's a subtlety which is lost in the arguments which converts everything to CO2 equivalents. Methane is reduced by 2/3 in 14 years. CO2 goes on for hundreds of years. So, yes, it's more harmful in the short term. I think, if I've got the number right, and somebody will correct me, it's 33 times more warming than an equivalent amount of CO2. It's immediate effect. But it only lasts for 14 years.
It's 100 years it lasts for.
Sorry?
It's 100 years, the short time is 100 years.
And it turns into CO2.
Yeah. So for the short time you're saying it's actually 100 years.
Well,
He meant relatively short. Compared with CO2 short.
as I'm approaching it, it doesn't seem very short.
But again, it's just, our view is very short term. We're not looking long term.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think one thing is, we're confusing, subsistence farmers with 2 or 3 cows and how they're using that in their system. And we're talking here about New Zealand. We're not talking about subsistence farming, so it's not really relevant. It's interesting that the way the seeding is, because we have a Roland on this side wants to change a lot. Kevin doesn't really want to change anything, and the people in the middle are kind of
Oh, I want to change a lot. I want to change a
fiddling
lot.
around a little bit and trying to make a buck. But I think there's no real, from the panel, I don't see any real vision. Yeah. So what's the vision? You know, why? So it's peak milk. Why are we changing? Is it a reason for sustainability? Is it a reason for ethics? Is it a reason for just because we have to? What's the
Possibly all of the
why
above.
are we talking about this? What's the vision coming from the panel?
I think
Okay.
that all of the panel have accepted that there's environmental consequences that need to be considered, there's sustainability that needs to be considered, there's health issues that need to be considered, and there are greenhouse gas issues that need to be considered. Have I missed any out?
Economic, probably.
Economic issues that need to be considered.
Ethics, yeah.
It's what they call a wicked problem in many ways. Yeah.
Many factors.
Thank you very much. My name's John Gould. I teach into some sustainability courses here in Lincoln. I am not a vegan, but I am concerned about sustainability, and I would like to ask Kevin and those pro-meat producers their view on sustainability, because I think we need to remind ourselves that 98% of the biomass on the planet is now either human or animals that are supporting humans in one way or the other, leaving only a couple of % for all of the wildlife. We're in a very serious climate catastrophe, and the extinction rate is at the highest level it has been for 65 million years.
Are you talking about climate change or biodiversity?
I'm
incursions?
talking about both,
All right.
both major. So if we're talking about sustainability, we were talking about peak meat, not no meat. And as a consumer of meat, I think we can all do a lot by reducing the amount of meat we're eating as a first step. But I'd like to ask the pro-meat panelists what their view is on the sustainability issue, given these massive environmental crises that the children are now on the streets demonstrating about.
Jocelyn, you haven't said anything for a while.
I was going to let this one go to Kevin.
No.
Sustainability, I think we're talking about the species diversity that you've just pointed towards is really key, and that means that we need to have more diverse primary production, so we're not just monoculture. And let's face it, dairy feels a whole lot monoculture to me, particularly down south where we've seen massive changes. And if we can diversify our plants, then we can diversify our insects. So for sustainability, for me, is some way that we can carry on producing food for humans without damaging that and the environment for the next generations to come.
I'm not sure I can add anything else other than to say I support those young people who are out on the streets. I'm for sustainability.
I'll just add something to that, as I think that we've got to look at our land and our land use and look at how we use that land within the land blocks we've got and say what is it that is suited to growing what plants and what is it might be suited to animals, or what of it should we retire, and make some decisions around that rather than carrying on and saying I am a dairy farmer, because in reality you're a custodian of that block of land and should be using it for the best purposes that you can. It might be plants, it might be animals, it might be conservation, and that's one of the things that will lead to more sustainable land uses.
I think that you were excluded from answering the question because you're not a meat supporter. Unless there's anything you want to add. I would add that the Eat Lancet report that we were talking about earlier that said you need a transformation of diet by 2050, it suggested that, didn't suggest, that it said that it should be considered taxing red meat. And taxing red meat would result in lower consumption of it. Anybody think that would be a great idea? So there goes the economy.
That's right.
Who's got the mic? Yeah.
Two short questions here. Nick, does intensive horticulture use more herbicide, insecticide and fertiliser per hectare than New Zealand dairy?
What was the first bit? Does the what?
Does intensive horticulture
Yes.
use more herbicide, insecticide and fungicides per hectare than New Zealand dairy?
I sense that might be a loaded question. I
I
sense
think-
you might know the answer. Anybody else know the answer?
Well, it depends which of if you break those products down into different categories, then yes, horticulture does use a lot more fungicides and probably more insecticides, depending on the, and then you break it down and you look within that and what is it that you're growing. So some crops need higher inputs of pesticides to achieve a good outcome than others. Fertiliser, well, again, that will depend on what you're doing with the land. So some pasture inputs are high with particular products. It depends on the fertility at the start and also on what you're trying to achieve. Some crops have fairly high fertiliser inputs, but the fertiliser inputs are designed around what the plant needs. So nobody puts on fertiliser that the plant doesn't need, and they try and balance it to what the plant needs so that they're getting a return on their investment in the fertiliser. Similarly with some of the pesticides and things that are used, they're used because it's the most sustainable economic way of growing that particular food. Now the change in the pesticides that we're using has been huge, so the amount of active ingredient that's being used in growing crops has dropped hugely, and the toxicity of those pesticides has dropped hugely. It's a very difficult question to answer with a short answer because there's so many things that interrelate depending on what you're growing.
There's a part two to this.
Oh, okay. Maybe I shouldn't have answered part one.
So, sorry, Ronan, this one's coming to you, mate. Do you only eat organic vegetables or do you eat these horticultural products as well?
I try to eat organic vegetables as much as possible, yes, but unfortunately I do eat non-organic vegetables as well, and I understand the actual consequence of that as well. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I've got a quick statement and followed by a quick question, if I may. 29% of the agricultural land in the world is measurably moving towards sustainability, and that's 360 million hectares of land. So if they're doing it, and they aren't dairy farmers, they're quite small farmers sometimes, why are we so slow?
Where are they doing it?
All around the world, 360 million hectares. But
not in New Zealand, is that what
well,
you're
I'm trying
saying?
to imply that those figures are growing very fast, but as I look around the farming land around Lincoln or anywhere else, I can't see any tangible changes being made. That's my point. So does the panel think that's a fair question? And does the panel think we're moving fast enough compared with 360 million hectares of land elsewhere?
Kevin?
I'm still not sure that I've understood the question. But as I said earlier, sheep farmers have reduced their greenhouse gases by 30%. I think, and what you're seeing is a significant number of most, in fact, dairy farmers fencing their waterways. We are moving towards sustainable agriculture. I'm not sure that I've understood what you're saying, but
We are seeing more kiwi fruit, we're seeing more apples, and we're seeing more horticulture. I think that there are shifts afoot. You mightn't see it right here, but one of the biggest challenges for us is to make sure that the products that we produce are wanted in the marketplace. So you sort of have to build from that end back. But I think in parts of New Zealand you'll be seeing big shifts.
and the same thing is happening with meat, sheep, dairy, all being driven these days by what the consumer wants.
So there is data in relation to a number of measures in the cropping industry. So the amount of cultivation that we do has markedly reduced. I don't know the figures off the top of my head. So that's the less you cultivate, the more sustainable your land use. There are a number of the use of fertilisers in a number of crops has reduced quite markedly to match it to needs. So there are huge shifts. Now they might not be visible as you move around the countryside, but they're certainly happening on farm.
Can I just clarify that? You're saying the less you cultivate, the more sustainable. So if our production drops, our sustainability goes up. Q&D.
So for some, well, the less you, if you cultivate, you are doing a number of things. You're reducing soil quality because you're damaging the soil, and you are also getting a loss of organic matter because there's emissions into the atmosphere. So
by virtue of cultivation.
By virtue of cultivation.
So is cultivation possible sustainably?
Well, growing crops, we're minimising cultivation, yes, and cultivating so that you're planting crops with no tillage is possible, yes, and it is happening on large areas and increasing areas of land throughout the world and within New Zealand. It does come with a problem in that to get the best outcomes, there is a need to use pesticides to do it effectively. And the major pesticide is a herbicide.
God damn, nothing is simple.
Nothing is simple, no. And unfortunately, it's glyphosate, which is being talked about for all sorts of the wrong reasons all around the world.
Which
and
is poisoning people.
Well, I don't think it. Don't know that the evidence
people.
that is there is clearly showing that it is not poisoning people.
Well, unfortunately, it is poisoning people.
There is
both
no
can't be right,
scientific evidence of that.
There's no scientific evidence that it's poisoning
people. Depends who you ask,
people.
isn't it? Depends who you ask.
If you ask the judge that ruled in favour of the person, wherever it was,
just one moment, what is your evidence for that, Ronan?
Well, I guess, reading through a lot of the actual information online, and again, just the basic practices, there's I don't believe everything
Fake news.
I read online. But, there's actually, the evidence I read online, I felt convinced that it was basically, it was harmful to humans, yeah. Like any chemical you pour on a plant, it has an effect. Some plants will actually absorb it, most plants will absorb it. It depends on the plant as well.
Nick, what's your evidence, what's your conviction that it's not poisonous based on?
Well, there are a large number of scientific papers that have been published showing that there are no effects of glyphosate on humans. So why is it being banned? Public perception, public pressure.
Public pressure that was not built on science.
Not built on science, exactly.
Next question.
Like GMO.
Question at the back there, sir, yes.
Hey guys, I've been vegan for a year now and I've never felt healthier.
Just speak a bit up, please.
Sorry, so I've been vegan for a year now. I've never felt healthier or stronger, and Mr. World, the biggest bodybuilder in the world, is vegan as well. So, so you definitely don't need meat to definitely don't need meat in your diet to be healthy.
Very good. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Yeah. So I'm from a sheep and beef station as well, so I understand the importance of agriculture. But we're going to witness catastrophic climate change soon, and the youth are obviously demanding radical action. So, and everyone here agrees that we need to cut meat consumption. So how can we convince our older generations, I'm witnessing it in these farming communities, to cut meat, because we need the older generations to come with us.
So how are you getting on? You're from a sheep and beef farm?
Yeah.
So how are you getting on with mum and dad?
Yeah, awesome. They're super supportive of it, yeah.
So, yeah, I know, but how you're asking how we should change the opinion of the elder generation, and you're right there. So how are you getting on?
Well, my family's probably pretty different to the majority of the rural community, yeah. But it's definitely difficult. I've felt, quite a bit of pushback, but yeah. So I'm just wondering if you guys had any tips on that, how best to communicate on a large scale.
No, sorry, can't help.
Not our expertise.
No advice whatsoever. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I was wondering, because we've been talking about peak meat, it's also a difference between how you produce meat as well. We were touching on before about carbon sequestration and CO2 and methane and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I was wondering if the panel could have a little bit of a chat about the difference between having maybe no-till practices where you have livestock on, which actually sequesters carbon and technically helps climate change, rather than sort of very intensive meat production based on grains, because there is quite a difference in the production of those two products. And coming back to that about the New Zealand point of difference and being grass-fed, isn't that what we should focus on? And as Steve rightly said before, that is kind of maybe the direction in which New Zealand should go. Is that maybe the direction New Zealand should take? More grass-fed, carbon sequestration, helping climate change, but also producing meat?
You don't work for beef and lamb by any chance, do you?
No, I do not.
I'd like to just
New Zealand is already, if I remember the numbers correctly, is already 85% plus grass-fed in its animals. For, for meat and for, for red meat and for milk. We don't use grain. It's too expensive relative to grass.
uneconomical.
So definitely if you're regrassing or establishing new pasture, then no tillage is an option and is used by lots of farmers to reduce the cost, reduce the environmental impacts, and to ensure that they're looking after the soils. And as a result of that, you're getting greater improvements in soil quality from the pasture that you're putting in there as well. And so you are looking after that part of the environment very well and with pasture.
But from an article which appeared in the press quite recently called "Kiwi Scientists Hope to Prove Best Meat is Good for You," a study funded by AgResearch and in partnership with, guess who? A meat company. So what's the results going to be like for that? Is it going to be, oh yes, it's great for you and it's good for you, and again, research funded by a meat company?
You don't have a very good view of scientists, do you?
No, but that's a completely valid point, Kevin.
It's not.
Research funded by a meat company is not going to be
So
treated.
they're comparing.
Who else is going to fund it, Kim?
Are you serious?
Shouldn't we be basing our decisions, and I should have said that in answer to the question on the sustainability, before we make decisions, we've got to have the right scientific evidence.
Yeah, independent funding,
and
not
if we
biased.
can't get the scientific evidence without funding it through a meat company or a dairy company or a
Kevin, that's shocking.
No, it's
I'm
not.
sorry,
It's
that's
true.
shocking. If
true.
we as a country cannot afford independent research into the environmental and health effects of our diet and our production,
No, you're talking to the wrong person.
then shame on us.
Talk to your politicians, not to me. We've been saying that for a long time because we've had to fund it.
Please ask a question.
May I hello, good evening. Okay, my name is Ruud Kleinpaster. First of all, very good that you mentioned bugs at some stage.
I
was
thought
waiting
you'd
for
like that.
No, just saying,
Especially
thank
for
you.
you.
Let's go. I just thought that was a good idea.
Mind you, they're your friends, you wouldn't eat them, would you?
I would, absolutely. They're
Okay.
fabulous. I'm with you, mate. They're brilliant. Yeah, anyway, but that's not what my question is. My question is about the word sustainable and sustainability, because it's been mentioned a lot. And I have a feeling that sustainability is the new marketing word. I mean, if I ask you, what's your relationship, how's your relationship with your partner, and you answer, sustainable, then I would say, I'm sorry to hear that. So let's cut the crap. Sorry about that. It is like that. It's like carbon zero. Is your endpoint, your goal, zero? Are you trying to do less bad or more good? So what defines sustainability?
I had a go at this, but
Yeah, I
see if
know.
you can do better.
Sorry.
I mean, I suspect that 7 billion people in the planet is not sustainable.
That's right.
So there's nowhere to go but down on that one. Have you got a view?
I like the definition that I think a number of people use in New Zealand. I'm farming my land for my children, for my grandchildren, and their grandchildren. That's sustainable.
But it's not. They're farming beyond the capability of the land. Dairy industry, particularly, is farming beyond.
If it's beyond the capability of the land, then I'm not going to be doing it for my grandchildren.
But how will you know?
How would you
that's
know it's not?
No, but sustainability,
Because it's
Kevin,
destroying
isn't an
the
act of
soils.
faith. You're not going to know that your great-grandchildren are going to be around to appreciate the land.
I
It's
won't
not
be,
an
no,
act
that's
of
right.
faith, it's a measurable state, surely, is it not? Jocelyn?
I think we're not measuring, we're not knowing exactly
But
what
we're
to measure
stripping
for,
out more than we're
for sustainability. I think there's an opportunity for us to define some of the parameters that we want to measure and to make sure that when we're producing anything on the land, it doesn't get any worse. So if we continue to make it better, then it's going to be sustainable for the long
But
term.
surely the goal
If
is
we
to
look
make it
at-
better.
If we look at what's happening elsewhere in the world, the UN has a number of goals, sustainable development goals. There's 17 of them. And if we look at our practices and start to line them up against those and say, are we able to meet those goals? Not all of them apply to agriculture, but a number of them do. And then and those are the definitions of sustainability that we should be looking towards, because that's what everybody else in the world is going to look towards.
Not say meet the goals. Okay. Yes.
Hi. So just quickly, in regards to the person's question before about that led us on to saying who pays for the research, it's actually in the RMA that those who are degrading the land have to pay for the research. So that's one of the reasons why for that. But I'm also wondering, on the pro-meat side, you say that you agree that it's unsustainable. We know that it's unsustainable, and all I'm hearing is about the profits and our culture and what we like, which is fair enough. I totally understand that. But I was one of those people protesting the other week for climate change, and I'm scared. We are not doing enough. I am terrified about hothouse Earth. We are going to cross this threshold, and hearing the things that I've heard tonight have not reinforced faith in me that the agricultural industry is doing a good thing. So how, from what I've heard, how can you reinforce to me that what we're doing is going to have offset the effects and give me hope for the future?
Give this young woman hope. Kevin?
I don't think that I said that eating meat was unsustainable. I'll just correct that point.
Everybody else does, though.
Well, that's fine. I believe that. I think the problem is that we agree with you 100%. We are not sure how to do it. What I'm saying to you is reducing dairy won't do it. Controlling dairy might. Reducing meat consumption will only go a little way, and we can only reduce meat consumption a relatively small amount, according to the Lancet thing. Developed countries have to reduce their red meat consumption. 100% agree. But developing countries will not do that for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, but New Zealand is also not doing anything. A report came out on Tuesday from the Environmental Agency, and the result was plant more trees. That's our goal, to soaking up all this carbon, actually making New Zealand green is grow more trees.
That's one solution.
No, that is the government's solution.
It's
you read
not
the
the only
report.
one.
That's black and white. That's what they said.
It's not the farmer's solution.
But farmers are not mentioned in that report. They are excluded. It's not a problem.
Can I add something between you two? The other, I think you need to have confidence that as a consumer, standing up and saying that actually you don't want to purchase sustainable things is going to make a big difference, because until we hear that unsustainable. Until we hear that there's actually a change in what you're buying and what you're not buying, then the products are going to keep coming out. So it actually makes a big difference if the consumers around the world say, actually, we want sustainable products and we want to have evidence that they are. I think one of the biggest challenges we've got is the fake news. If we're not measuring the right stuff, we don't know if we've got sustainable production systems or not, and we're not always comparing oranges with oranges. So we have to get better at that. But certainly make it known, because that makes a big difference.
Certainly a lot of the things that
we
are
will
measured.
modify our behaviours. Farmers will modify their behaviours. They will adapt. So keep saying so.
We are measuring a lot of things on farms all over the country which can help us to understand the impacts of what we're doing on the environment, on greenhouse gas emissions and on sustainability. We're not reporting them necessarily because we don't have the frameworks to report them to a consumer. We have the frameworks to report them to somebody who wants to measure greenhouse gases, but we don't have the frameworks in place to report them to a consumer in a way that it means something to them.
And Nick reminds me that if you look at the Fonterra annual report, they report on their sustainability factors every year now in their annual report and have done for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Which is strangely
And if you don't like it, tell them so. If they're not going fast enough, tell them so.
I want some optimism from Ronan, please.
Well, I mean, just changing your diet, the consumer is power. You know, if the consumers say we want to be more sustainable, they will choose a diet which is aligned to that as well. I mean, we know that, you know, for example, you go to any supermarket these days and you look at the ingredients. Dairy is fleeced through most ingredients. Why? It's because it's cheap and cheerful. You know, it's a replacement material for a lot of cheap things. So, you know, looking at alternatives, more pure kind of, I suppose, ingredients will be actually a better way to go forward. And actually, even just ingredients which don't have animal products.
We're just about an end, I'm sorry. Have we got time for one more question? You've had a question. Had a question from someone who's not had a question before, please. All right.
Okay. Colin Merck. I'm a reducivarian. I'm a reducivarian. We've heard that there's a lot of elephants in the room in this debate, and we've heard that there's not enough on the savannah from John back there. I'd like to see more out there in the wild. Surely the biggest elephant in the room here is population, and we haven't really talked about that.
I did try and introduce that elephant.
Yeah, well, I mean, the concern that I have about the vegan argument, and I've heard about it, you know, it can feed the whole world, you know, the whole 10 billion, is that it wouldn't stop there, that it would actually just, in fact, be an excuse to bring more people into the world to feed up to the total carrying,
increase population,
to keep increasing the population and the number of consumers that will have a bigger impact on the environment.
So more vegan.
What I'd like to know what their sort of what the response to that is, how we actually look at reducing, you know, world population in a sort of a fair and humane way.
Perhaps we'll talk about that. Perhaps we'll talk about that next year. Can I just, that's it. But can I ask any of you if this has encouraged you to change your eating habits? Stick your hand up. Wow, really? You're going to eat more meat now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well done, panel. With a peaceful mind and a respectful heart, we will always get the best results. I think we've got them tonight. At times it wasn't that peaceful, but we've got there. And I think perhaps, coming on from Colin's comment, next year it might be peak people. Just going back over what we've heard tonight, we've heard that plant products to produce high-quality, sustainable, low food waste with local genetics and unique products are what we need to go forward. We've also heard that we need to have a look at our land use and use the best land for the best use that we've got. As a point of interest, the new land that's being brought into production by CPW Stage 2 in mid-Canterbury, the Pukekohe potato growers are coming down here and buying it to start producing potatoes in Canterbury. So there's a change in land use that may not see it in dairy. We've also heard that we need a diversity in plant and animal proteins, rebalancing our meat consumption, which is fantastic, and I think we've got agreement with that here tonight. We've also heard that milk and meat are high quality and nutritious, and we need it for the rest of the world from Kevin, which I think is a fact, but how we deal with that is another way. We've heard that our sheep emissions are down by 30% since 1990, clever sheep and clever sheep farmers. And our dairy industry has the least emissions of anywhere in the world, although we do have a lot of cows. We've also heard that there's an agreement that there are too many cows in Canterbury and we need to have less. So we've talked about peak meat tonight, maybe we've talked about peak cow as well. We've heard of the need to have a dietary shift, and that being vegan is more of a lifestyle than a diet. And we've also heard that Daisy has a very happy 5 years of life as a cow. And that we've also heard that we need to have animals in agriculture to achieve the balance, and we don't have to eat them. And that's a very good point to take home with you tonight. An agreement that the dairy industry in Canterbury needs to be cut back. Yes, we've had that. And the other things, we had some interesting things, and I'm just going to say here, which way, and it's way with an E-Y, which way are we going to go? We were talking about the amount of water being used to produce milk. Well, maybe we should be having sensational Selwyn District Council bottled water in a glass bottle. Cut your rates. Transition through meat to other plant foods, so moving from meat to getting back into plant foods is something that we're hoping to see used, and looking at the hands up tonight and the amount of people who are looking at changing their diet, it's something we may be doing. And more diversity in cropping and our food innovation. Consumer-led farming. Your question over here, fantastic earlier on. Tell people what you want. The consumer must drive what our markets are going to do. I think that's a message coming through tonight. Consumer-led change to what we've got. What is sustainable? What is sustainability from Rude? Continuing to make it better, I think, is where we came to out of that. We need to know more about what our consumers want and our needs to change what is being produced. And it is very much so here in Canterbury, where we have some top quality soils that are coming into use at the moment. So the thing I'd finish up is peak meat doesn't necessarily mean no meat, but it could mean a bit less meat in your diet. Thanks for coming along tonight. I wish you all the best. Salam alaikum.
Well, thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? Is it working? Yeah. Good. It's a really great night. It wouldn't be the same without you, so thanks for coming. I'm Sue Jarvis from the Lincoln Envirotown and Lincoln University, and chair of the planning committee. And we've been working for over 9 months to bring this to you tonight. I hope you're impressed. Also, a few thanks. Thanks to Malcolm Lyle for being our MC again. He always does a great job. And thanks so much to the other committee members. And it's Dave Fitzjohn, which is Lincoln Envirotown Project Manager, with help from Meredith, who's over there, who's elect coordinator, Steve Ratton of Lincoln University over there, and Janine Johnson, who used to be from Lincoln University until recently, Brett Robinson, University of Canterbury, Seth Lawrenson from Ag Research, Kate Love, Landcare Research, and Ralph Scott of Lincoln Envirotown and Clive from Food Research. So we actually got quite a wide-ranging membership of the planning committee. And also thanks so much for the university students who've been helping tonight, and the members of Lincoln Envirotown, and of course Lincoln University for hosting these events each year. I mean, it's been a long relationship now, hasn't it? And especially Rebecca Peterson, the conference and events coordinator, have been very helpful. And of course the panellists, again, we wouldn't be here without them, and they've freely given their time. Of course, it wouldn't be a discussion without you guys, especially certain members. I don't mean to be comments. We're hoping we'll be able to manage another one next year. I haven't quite checked this with Kim yet, so we'll have work on that. Hoping there will be. We have come up with a sort of topic, and the topic, we think, is going to be regenerative agriculture. What's that, you say? Is the way we are looking after our land leading to a better planet or environmental ruin? Is regenerative agriculture the answer? And having a discussion about sustainability, one of the people I've been talking to about this said, you should stop using that word sustainability, because that just means we carry on doing what we're doing so we can keep doing it for the next few generations. Are we doing okay at the moment? Couldn't we actually do better? Perhaps a better word than sustainable. We should get rid of that word. Anyway, that was the comment. So anyway, I'd really quite like to see you guys all back here next year. It'll probably be on the 26th of March next year. Before we go, I've actually got just a few little things to give these people to say thank you. So have a big clap to say thank you. I'll just give out one or two little presents, but in the meantime, before I get to say it, before I forget to say it, make sure you have a really safe journey home, won't you? So I'm just going to give a few little presents out here. Just a minute. Oh, Ralph's sorting it out for me. They're all especially environmentally produced, well-organised bags. I think they're probably vegan as well, but I'm not quite sure about that. Thank you so much. And I'm not quite sure about what's inside. We'll not show everybody what's inside.
Thank you.
Do you want to give those out at the end there? You give those out. Oh, where's Malcolm? Malcolm thought we... But Malcolm needs one as well because he put such an effort in summarising that amazing discussion. Right. Yeah, more claps if you like. Clap again. Thank you. Also, thank you so much. Really enjoyed you coming. Good night.
So.